So we'll get started. Sorry for that, 15 minutes of figuring out Zoom. Anyway, hi everybody, my name is Anna. I'm sorry for the weird camera. I had to turn on my other computer. This is an old computer with a bottom facing camera, so you can see all my fingers. But I am joined here by my sister Anastasia, who is the actual founder of CurePDE, and I'm helping her with all of our scientific stuff. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to introduce the foundation a little bit before we allow Curtis and Christy and their team to chat. And then at the end, we wanted to have some time for Q&A and just a little bit of discussion on where we could all imagine the 27 of us that are here taking this sort of group that we're trying to form and the kinds of things that we need. I assume if people are raising their hands, it's promoted to panelists, so I'll just do that. Where we all think that we can sort of make progress as a community. And so with that, I will share my screen. I didn't put together too many slides. Hi, Becky, we can see your video. Okay, so I didn't put together too many slides, but I did want to say thank you to everybody, and thank you to everybody who came. It means a lot to us. I know that everyone who has been either supporting or caring for or going through living with PDE has probably at some point thought that it would be nice to have a community of people around you. And I know that we've all kind of made it happen in our own ways with our own groups of friends, or a lot of you know Curtis and Christy and their team. And it's taken our family a little bit over 11 years to finally kind of get together and say that we want to help make a more formalized effort in this. And I just wanted to kind of introduce you to us first, and then say why we started CurePDE and why now. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Anna. I am actually a scientist, so I did my master's in, at the time, not even knowing that we would have a B6 deficiency. I actually studied a B7 deficiency for my master's degree, and my bachelor's was in human genetics. I went to University of Virginia, if any of you are on this side of the country. I moved overseas to Germany, which is where I did my PhD in rare disease and neuroscience. I studied a movement disorder that was not related to PDE at all for my PhD. And then I transitioned actually into helping scientists make sense of big data sets and sort of pathways. And I currently work for Booz as a consultant, as my full-time job. I have two small kids, 2 boys, Alex and Ben, and my sister, Anastasia, can introduce herself and tell you a little bit about herself. I'll stop sharing for a second and let a few people in while Anastasia talks.
Thank you for joining, everyone. My name is Anastasia, and I'm a founder of CurePDE and the mother to Andre, who has been diagnosed with PDE at the age of 4 weeks and is now 12 years old. Although I'm eternally grateful to Dr. Lerner at UCLA for recognizing PDE, our journey has been a painful one, filled with a lot of anxiety. Receiving a diagnosis took about a month, which felt like eternity at the time, and it was the darkest time of my life. Even after the diagnosis, there was little information available on the prognosis of patients with PDE. And every step in Andre's development was a victory, but it was a very lonely journey. Fast forward 12 years, Andre is a thriving preteen, and I have more time and resources to dedicate my time to helping others. I formed this foundation to provide support and resources to other families with PDE, to help families who are seeking a diagnosis to receive it faster, and to contribute to the research on PDE so patients can have better outcomes. With that said, Anna, take it from here. Welcome everyone again, and I'm happy to see you here.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so then, so I think Anastasia sort of explained why now we have a little bit of, our kids are a little bit older. We've kind of got our head above water a little bit. And so we understand that not everyone is in that position. And so when we kind of offer you the opportunity to volunteer to do something, also with us, don't feel like you need to commit yourself to running a whole foundation. But if you are interested in ever contributing or helping us with anything, then, you know, we would be grateful. So we got going last year, and just to give you a heads up on what we've really been up to, we set up the website, we set up the foundation to have all the legal status that we need in order to apply for different grants. We set up sort of the back-end infrastructure to be able to, you know, to reach out to our other organizations, to be listed on things like, you know, orphan networks, rare disease networks, so that other folks can find us. We've been reaching out to the research community, which is how we got in touch with Curtis, who's been so lovely in his lab, Christy, and the rest of their lab that I believe is also here. Because we know that families are really looking for up-to-date information. We want to know what's going on, you know, what kind of treatments are coming out, what should we be looking out for? And so it's really important for us to get in touch with researchers. We've been setting up these webinars, which will hopefully go smoother and smoother as they continue. We've been applying to different grants to try to get money in order to fund different kinds of activities. We want to make sure that we become available to people who maybe need this information in a different language, or, you know, if we want to sponsor some sort of 5K or something like that. And also because we, or at least my sister and I, haven't necessarily been really plugged into the community, we've been trying to think of ways to get engaged and involved and understand what all the other families need, because as she said, sometimes it feels like we're on an island, and maybe other people feel the same way too. And I think it's important to bring folks together. We've been looking at a bunch of research, and we've been trying to synthesize that research for you, and I'll show you some of the blogs we have posted. We've been figuring out how to do the newsletter, and also recruiting volunteers. So if any of these things sound like something that you want to do, if you want to help us write blogs, if you want to help us write newsletters, organize events, if you want to actually host some of the webinars, we would be happy to provide anybody any of the sort of support they need in order to do that. So if you want to volunteer for anything, if you have any idea of something you want to do, we can help you provide the back end for it. So you know, if you want to help us print t-shirts, or you know, really whatever it is, then we'd be happy to support you if you just have the time to put into it. And it can be a little bit of time if you just have a few months during the summer, for example, or whatever it is. So feel free to email me. I was going to walk everybody through the website just to show you some of the things that we already have available in case you haven't been able to see it. Okay, let's see. So let me move my Zoom thing. So here you can read a little bit about the foundation and who we are, the things that we really want to focus on, that we really want to bring hope and collaboration and empowerment to the families here. But also we really want to focus on scientific research and innovation that's important to us. You can read our story, learn more about us. You can also learn a little bit more about PDE. in a way that I've synthesized. So there's a lot of different resources. I've tried to make this useful for folks. So we have a lot of different topics here. And then we also have 2 places where you can read blogs. The one that's called blog is actually meant for us to share personal stories. So you can see we posted our story about Andre here. And then we had another mom who wanted to post her son's story. And this is really meant for us to connect each other to each other and to each other's stories. So if you ever want to post a story, you can let us know. We can take out names. We don't have to post a picture. But it is meant to sort of give other people a real understanding of what other families are going through. And then we have a number of here under research and education, what I've tried to do, and my parents who are also lifelong scientists have tried to do, is to really look through the publications, so the literature that is happening in real time, and talk about those publications. So if you look here, some of these blogs are, for example, related to current treatment perspectives. And what I try to do is let you know, so I'll just click into one of these. I let you know that this is, these summaries are from actual scientific publications. So if you wanted to, you can access the original article here. If you wanted to read the original publication that I'm summarizing for you. And I give, within each blog, I try to provide a more scientific perspective of the topic. But if you're just, if your brain is just fried and you just want to read something that helps you understand the topic and hopefully an easy to consume fashion, then I've kind of put a simplified perspective here. And so feel free to look through any of these blogs. I think I tried to put in about 20 so far. Hopefully they are useful to you, and let me know if you find other publications you want me to summarize. Yeah, oops, sorry about that. That's my work calendar now. And then you can also get in touch with us here and sign up for the newsletter. So under Get Involved is where I'm going to be posting more events. So I posted the first one here, and then I'll try to keep posting events as they keep coming up here. So you can always check here. And we try to send out the newsletter. And most likely you're not here to hear about me, but you're most likely here to hear from Curtis. So I'll pass the baton on to him and Christy. And the goal was really to get you all to be introduced to some of the researchers within our community who are really working hard to make advances for families like ours. And anyway, I won't talk anymore. So nice to meet everybody. Curtis, it's all you.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to assume that my slides are showing well unless somebody says otherwise. But it's really a pleasure to meet everyone. I hope I've met many of you already. We as a lab, we as a research group are really focused on trying to understand this disorder from the real experts, which is families and patients themselves. I also have children, but I don't really know what it's like to have a child with a metabolic disorder or a seizure disorder like PDE. So really we view this as a two-way street where hopefully we do provide some information to you, but we're really selfishly trying to learn a lot more about this disease from you guys. My hope for this talk and Anastasia and Anna's hope for this talk was to really introduce you to like the larger PDE community. This really isn't about our lab here in Colorado. And I think there's a couple of messages I'm hoping to get across. The first is there is a lot of really smart, dedicated scientists and physicians who are all working together. And our goal is to make you as a patient or your children's lives better. And that is what I hope you get from this. I'm going to try to tell you about some of the larger groups that are working and try not to go into much detail of what we've done, but to give some examples to just show you how much we really are trying to work together. So I'm going to start with the PDE Consortium. This was actually started about 15 years ago, and it really brought together a lot of important, well-known clinician scientists and some younger folks like myself. I'm going to call myself younger despite the graying of the hair you might see on camera. And I'm going to assume many of you on this call are from North America, so I apologize about that, but I'm going to bring up some of the North American individuals. So this group of people was really started by Sylvia Stockler in Vancouver, and it continues today, and it's led by Clara van Karnebeek, who is in the Netherlands. And there's two of us in the US who are leading this effort, myself, and I get to work closely with Professor Sid Gosby, who is on the call today. Dr. Gosby has really dedicated his entire career to PDE, and I've learned so much from him and so excited that he is on this call and one of our team members for the consortium. There's two big goals of the consortium. First is that clinicians and scientists can work together, that we can think about these ideas, that we can share data among each other, that we sometimes share samples that we receive from patients with each other because it's very difficult to get blood or urine from a lot of patients with PDE. So if you join one of our studies, we usually ask if that's okay, and we really try to be collaborative. And so some examples of how that collaborative work has gone is that we have published a couple of different guidelines for physicians to use to help treat your children. And so these were really made to say these are the experts in this disorder. And if you happen to have one patient with PD or two, these are the general guidelines for how you should treat your patient. Now, these really were developed by a group of worldwide experts. So here is a map of everyone, every institute that was involved in this couple year process. And so there's some downsides when you do that. Really, this is not written for how patients should be taken care of in Virginia or in Colorado or in Australia. And we do recognize that there might be some limitations based on insurance or geographic area. But really, these are sort of the generalized ways that we think that most children with PDE should be treated. If you look through this paper, this was published in 2021, you'll see that we talk a lot about what does the diagnosis of PDE mean. You've already saw on the website a little bit from Anna about how there are multiple different types of B6 seizures. So when we're talking about each one, what does it mean? How should most individuals be treated? And very importantly, something we're really focused on is what do you do after the initial seizures are stopped, and how do you monitor disease moving forward? Please feel free to take a look at that paper. I will make sure that it's on the website, or you could always reach out to me for a copy, and I often include these little QR links. Like going back a slide or two, you'll see that I always put these little QR links in case you have your smartphone and you want to be directed to the paper directly. Some other ways you could hear about this paper is that myself and two people, Peter Clayton and Emma Foote, did a podcast on the consensus guidelines that are sort of more of a fun way to really talk about how these were developed and what these mean for patients. The year that we came out, we were one of the most clicked on podcasts on Twitter, which was fun. But one of the reasons I really like this podcast is Peter Clayton talks a little bit about the history of PDE. It is he and his lab that actually identified the gene for this disorder. So it's just a really interesting historical take on this disease. This consortium is also really interested in doing research because it's that research that helps us really establish our guidelines and figure out what we should do and what we should do next. And probably the most significant research study we have is our natural history study, or the PDE registry. You can find out more about the registry on our website on the pdeonline.org. But this has been ongoing since 2014. We've actually published quite a few papers from the information that we've received from the families. And if you're on this call and you're a member of this research study, we are so grateful that you've shared your story, you've shared your medical information, your laboratory information, and really helped us think about this disease differently. If you've ever called me and our lab team and just asked general questions about PDE, you'll probably hear me give a lot of statistics like, oh yeah, we definitely know that there are other kids who've had a cleft lip and it's this many. And we're getting that data because of this study. So thank you. Just one example of the papers we've published for this. This came out, I believe, last year. Yep, 2022. And what this paper really was looking at is there a difference in how patients do long-term, whether they're treated with only B6 or pyridoxine, or whether they're treated with both B6 plus some of the other treatments we've published about over the last 10 years. And we refer to them all as lysine reduction therapies. And if you're on the call and you feel like I don't actually know what lysine reduction therapies are, or I've never talked about any other therapies than B6, I think that would be something we could have a definite webinar on, and please reach out to the CurePDE team if that's something you'd like more information about. So in this paper, what we did is we took all of this really great data that through the natural history study, and what we compared those patients. We compared them based on those who only took the B6 vitamin and those who had B6 vitamin and something else. And we did only look at one outcome measure primarily, and that is IQ, and could have a long conversation about that's a poor way to think about how a patient is doing, or at least it's just one measure of how a patient is doing. But in that study, we did show, among other things, that if we were able to diagnose patients very early in life, and if we were able to start treatment very early in life, we did see an improved IQ point. In fact, it's about a 22-point IQ. Now, maybe some of you on this call don't know what any of those numbers mean when you think about IQ, but in general, IQ is a test that we use that sort of is a gross way, a general way of measuring how well someone is thinking and processing information. And in the world, in general, that IQ is about 100 plus or minus 15 points. I mean, normal individuals, everyone that we think of and that we see, range from about an 85 to 150 and 115. And what we saw was that if we diagnose patients early and we treat them early, that their IQ is raised to the normal range, just like people who don't have PDE. And we thought this was a really great study that both showed like there's a reason we're doing treatment, and that also it really emphasized how important it is to us to make sure that we are trying to diagnose every patient as early as possible and make sure that we are getting the right information about treatment to their physicians. So how can you be involved? We would love for you, anyone who is not a part of this natural history study and is interested to please think about contacting one of us. Again, there's a lot more information about the natural history study on our PDE consortium website. I do assume, again, that many of you are in North America. And so this is the list of the investigators in North America. So maybe you see your hospital or your physician on this list of individuals. That would be a perfect person to reach out to talk about joining the natural history study. If you are not in North America, you can see all of the consortium members on that website here under consortium, or you could always reach out to me and Christy and who's our lead in our lab for these projects, and we'd be happy to either enroll you ourselves or give you an idea of who the right person to contact is, and even make a nice little introduction for you and them. So the PDE consortium is certainly the most active group. We've published a lot of papers. We've done a lot of work over time, and I really hope that many of you have heard of that group of people. This group is a little bit newer. This is the Charlie Consortium. And this group is actually primarily a group of European investigators. In fact, I'm the only US-based investigator in this group, and there are some investigators in Vancouver for North America. And so the goal of this consortium is really focused on developing new treatments for two diseases, glutaric aciduria type 1, and I'm going to call that GA1, and PDE. And so There's a lot of efforts into understanding how these treatments could work in animal models. We're mainly using mice, but we also use zebrafish that have been given either GA1 or PDE. We sometimes use some cell lines in the lab, meaning that if you've ever donated skin to my lab or another lab, we take that little bit of skin we've seen and we grow it up, and then we try these medications on those skin cells. So this is a very laboratory-focused group of people who are working on treatments. Now, maybe it does not make immediate sense to everyone why both GA1 and PDE are being together in this grant and in this treatment. And so I know this is a overly complicated slide. This is from a review article that Dr. Gospe and I wrote recently. But I want to show that both PDE here in red and glutaric aciduria here in yellow are both disorders of lysine metabolism. They both are genetic diseases where the lysine amino acid cannot be broken down. In fact, if you're on a formula right now, whether you have PDE or GA1, you're both taking the exact same formula. And that formula is, we hope, doing the exact same thing in both groups of patients, and that is making these red biomarkers lower. So in PDE, we have some biomarkers that here in red that we sometimes talk about a lot in clinic, like alpha aminoadipic semialdehyde or AASA. And patients with GA1 sort of have these same things, these same conversations with their doctors. They also can have epilepsy, although it's a little bit more rare, and they also have problems, neurologic problems. And so the treatment is the same. And the treatments that we are working on in the Charlie Consortium, we think could help both diseases. And so most of those are trying to develop some way of stopping the lysine from growing through this pathway. And we are working on new medications that you would take. Sometimes we're working on things that we are genetically editing this step. And so that's why the two conditions are together, is that we think that there could be one treatment for both groups of diseases. Again, this is mainly a European group of individuals, but I want to point out that here I am without a beard. And here is Kathy, who is on this call, who also leads the Organic Aciduria Association, the OAA, which is another support group focused on all organic acidurias, including GA1 and PDE. And she's one of our family sponsors for this study. We do have one of our goals for the Charlie Consortium is really to make sure that we as scientists are doing things that families really care about. We don't want to be doing science for science sake. We want to be making sure that we are focused on things that will help you as a family, you as a patient, your children. And so we have partnered with 4 family organizations. 3 of them are from Europe. And Hannah Decker is the lead of the VKS support group. She is also a parent of a child with a metabolic disorder. And so another way we are asking if you think that this is an interesting project and you'd like to participate is that we have an ongoing survey of families with both GA1 and PDE. We ask you, I think it's the first or second question, to identify which disease you're talking about. But we really want to make sure, again, that we as scientists are doing things that are important to you as families. So big groups of people all over the world working to make your child's life better. Of course, there's also groups of people who are working a little bit on their own. For example, my lab here, where I think we at least have 2 other members of my lab, Christy and Gloria, who are both on this call. We're working every day to make kids' lives with PDE better as well. And one example of this is we've been working on newborn screening for this condition for a little over 10 years. Our hope really is to be able to identify every baby at birth. In many cases, we hope before the first seizure even starts. And now maybe you're on this call and you're like, I don't see the importance of that. My child had 1 seizure and that physician right away knew that they had PDE. And right away, we started receiving treatment. And that is wonderful and amazing. I'm very excited about that. But there's also a lot of families who have gone through months to year journey trying to figure out why their kid was having health problems and delaying that unknown of why and the delay of treatment. And so this has been a real focus of ours. We're excited that in 2019, we published a brand new biomarker, a circulating small molecule, a metabolite, something that we could use to tell who as a newborn had PDE and who did not. We refer to that biomarker as 6-oxopipicolate. And so we published the first paper in 2019, and we've had 2019 have had some other couple papers, and we feel like we're really getting close to making newborn screen a reality. One thing I want to emphasize about that is that even in that study, we worked really closely with families. And in fact, our very first funding for that study was donated by some families who lived in Colorado at the time and don't anymore, but did some fundraising. That money helped us get some money from our institution to continue this work. And the money from the institution and families actually got us money from the NIH, who currently funds our newborn screening work. And so just one of the goals is, as all of these researchers are, is we want to make sure we're working with families to do what the things that are important to them. And we're so grateful that sometimes families also support us. We're not the only ones working on newborn screening. The group in the Netherlands identified a second biomarker in the year 2021. So both of those things were pretty recently. And they also seem to really be a good way of doing newborn screening. And then, of course, my group in Colorado and that group in the Netherlands has joined forces, and we're working together as we try to figure out what is the best way to do this to make sure we can pick up every child possible. So there's a bunch of small research groups who are working on their own, although I just admitted that we continue to collaborate even in those small groups. Also, if you wanted to participate in our newborn screen study, we'd be very excited. We definitely need more people to participate in our research, and you could contact us in Colorado, either myself, which I'm always happy to answer emails, or Christy, who really leads most of this work for us. If you're interested in, could you help in the newborn screen study? Really, I wanted to paint a very large overview and get one message across. There's a lot of people who care about your children, your family, this disease, and we really are all working collaboratively to really try to make life better. Our big goals are really to make sure that every child is diagnosed as soon as possible, and to make sure that we're thinking about the right treatment and better treatments for your kids. And that's all I was hoping to get across in this talk. And I don't know if there are any questions, but I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Curtis. And I guess with that, let's see if we can have hands raised. I think attendees and panelists who are promoted to panelists can raise your hands. The one thing that I wanted to say about questions, and I hope this comes across correctly, is that I also want us to have like larger questions that we can base future webinars on. So for example, you know, today Curtis can't answer everyone's questions. Let's have a set of questions that we can plan as a group and say, okay, for example, next month we'll meet to discuss topics of diet, and, you know, the month after that, sleep and things like that. So if your question doesn't get answered today, feel free to just send a list of questions to me, and I will try to group them all together to sort of guide our future webinars, because the topics for those haven't been set. But Charlie, I see that you have your hand up, so I think you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Anna and Anastasia, so much for setting this up. And Curtis, thank you so much for your time. It really means a lot as a parent of a PDE patient to have access like this and to also not feel alone. I'm going to be cheeky and I'm going to ask two questions just in case it doesn't loop back to me. I have a lot more, but these are sort of my pressing ones. I understand the majority of the research occurring at the moment is quite correctly focusing on sort of terminating the pathway as close to sort of the lysine intake as possible. But as a parent, you're always wondering, what can you do today to sort of provide the best outcome possible beyond just what's already known? So it seems to me that there could be potentially a benefit in trying to promote better excretion of the metabolites, or more rapid excretion of the metabolites, which led me down the pathway of looking at, well, what can improve mitochondrial function to sort of promote metabolite excretion as these things are normally excreted. And you get into all this sort of like dark web of different supplements, CoQ10, everything like that, when you're just looking at how can we improve that mitochondrial function. Is that something that you've come across in your research, or is anybody looking at how can we get rid of these metabolites better? And is there any sort of advice you can give around that? And the second question is perhaps hopefully a little more simple, which was with regards to arginine supplementation. There seems to be a lot of different views, in the sense that some people say, well, if you're appropriately restricting lysine in the diet, then you don't need to do arginine supplementation. But then there are some studies that suggest there may be some kind of a small benefit from arginine fortification. So just whether you have any thoughts around that as well would be really great to understand.
Yeah, Charlie, great questions about therapy. I think we want to do two things at the same time, is think about the future and how can we make sure that we can treat this disease so well and so simple that we almost don't think about it, right? That's our goal. We hate to use the word cure, even though it's in the CurePDE type, but that's kind of what we want, right? We want to be able, such a simple treatment, it's basically a cure. But what about today? And so our group has published a series of papers on these dietary treatments because we do think that they make a difference today. And so we've published some papers on the use of lowering the amount of lysine that a child eats, and whether that is by counting lysine or by drinking a formula that has no lysine, that really helps. I can say that we just had a paper accepted over the weekend on a lot more detailed information about how to do that diet. And maybe on one of these webinars, we can have one of our actual dietitians who does this day to day talk a little bit through the diet questions. And so those diets, what they're trying to do is limit the amount of stuff that builds up to start. And so you're asking, well, what about the next step? There's still some that builds up. How do we get rid of it? So I'm going to take another step back, and that is why we have recommended arginine starting since 2015. And some people may have heard of the first paper we wrote. We sort of tongue-in-cheek called it triple therapy, because we recommended that patients be on B6. You should always be on some level of B6, some sort of lysine restricted diet, and the arginine therapy. And the reason we include arginine, even when you're on the diet, is you still need lysine. Lysine is still really important for you for growth, for muscle development. There's no one is ever going to tell you to have zero lysine in your diet. And so what the arginine does is it tries to stop the lysine from being broken down, especially in the brain. And there's some nice studies that show that actually works. We've done those studies mainly in healthy adults. That's always where we start our research on. But if you are taking the lysine and then you take the arginine as well, it'll further stop the lysine from breaking down. So it's sort of almost of an additive therapy. So the next question is whether or not we can get rid of the parts that get stuck in there is a really brilliant one, and it's just not that simple. I'm hesitant to recommend anyone in any metabolic disorder think about taking supplements. I do metabolism in general, and so does Kathy. Knows a lot about these supplements from other organic aciduria. So at time we've recommended things like carnitine, CoQ10, for a while even biotin or B7, as Anna called it at one point. But what we've really shown is that those supplements don't really seem to make a difference. We're worried. I don't think that they cause harm, except for that it's extra cost that families are paying for. It looks like most of those get peed out very quickly, and they don't actually change the amount of the things that are building up. So that's why we don't recommend them at the moment. There has been other ways of people trying to figure out, could we make some sort of sponge that does suck up all the other metabolites and things that I know people have tried, and other things that have sort of been more conversations about what could that be. But at this moment, we don't have another therapy to get rid of those metabolites. So most of our goals are to stop them from building. We know that the diet is hard. Like any of you who've been on a diet, it's just not easy. Whether it's for weight loss or healthiness, it's just hard. And so our goal has always been that the diet is a short-term gap, is that we think that this will help kids today, and that tomorrow, hopefully, we have something better.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Just make sure I understand with regards to the arginine versus pure lysine reduction. My question was really around, if you were to sort of basically compare an arginine plus mild lysine restriction diet with a very heavy lysine restriction diet, which is sort of the information I'm getting from the care team with Jack, who are my son, sorry, who is basically, they're suggesting that if you very heavily restrict lysine in the diet, you don't need to do arginine because you're getting the same effect. But from what you're saying, it's suggesting that maybe there is a slight benefit to the arginine supplementation, purely because it targets the, I can't remember whether it's the peroxisomal or the saccharophene pathway, but the pathway that's in the brain more favorably, let's say.
Yeah, I'm going to give an example that Christy is going to be on camera and roll her eyes on, because I do it a lot and she doesn't think it's good. But really, we hope that the arginine will stop the transport of whatever lysine is left over. So I don't know, here in Denver, we have a highway that feels like there is always traffic on it. Whenever I try to avoid the highway as much as possible. But in the middle of the night, it's great. Like I can drive down that highway, I can go to the city, I can go to the mountains, and that highway I can drive as fast as I want. And so I sort of think of that as sort of like when you're eating lysine, there's nothing that stops it from moving to the kidneys, to the from the kidneys to the liver, from the liver to the brain. It's a really open highway, and whatever lysine you do eat and doesn't get incorporated in the muscle, it's going right to the brain. And so what we actually try to do with the arginine is we try to create a traffic jam on purpose. We try to make that highway stuck so that you have extra lysine and it just cannot get to the brain. So we do think there is an additive effect even when you're on a strict diet, because you have to eat some lysine. In a theoretical world where you could be on a diet with no lysine whatsoever, I would agree. There's no reason to add arginine in it, but that's just not possible. You will have to eat lysine.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks. We're actually coming up on the hour. If nobody else wants to ask a question, maybe, oh, okay, wonderful, thank you. You can unmute.
Hi, Anna and Anastasia. Thank you so much for setting up this. Curtis, it's so nice to see you and listening to you. As you know, our cases, we have two daughters with rare, extremely rare, I guess, rarer than this, but I remember contacting Dr. Gospi 16 years ago, and trying to learn. Thank you so much for setting up this. This is so nice, to hear, that so many people working on this case. I have three questions. One is, Curtis, is there any effort for, maybe possibly editing, those genes and just, provide the cure? The other one is, you talk a lot about lysine, and we haven't tried that for our daughters. They are older kids. Is there any benefit at this age, 16 and 12 and 14? The other question I have, I know our cases is a little bit different, but we provide those supplements, B6 supplement. And is there any other brand that you guys prefer or families prefer than other ones? We tried a compound product, I guess, at one of the local pharmacies, and we noticed it was not good. My kids did not absorb it well, but the seizures continued. But once we tried a specific brand, seizures were gone completely. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always good to see you. Um, the gene editing to correct things is certainly something we've done within the Charlie Consortium. What we've actually tried to do is do the gene editing of that very first step in the lysine pathway, to stop it from those metabolites building up. Because if we were going to have to edit the gene for your kid's disorder, we would have to figure out a way to edit your child's mutation and then try to figure out a way to edit Becky's child's mutation and then Charlie's child's mutation. And in each one, we'd have to figure out a way to edit that specific one. And now there are some mutations that are very, very common. Like there's one that about 30% of everyone has. So that could be a way of doing the treatment. But we really are trying to find ways that we can help every child, just not 30%. I think the website's done a really good job about talking about the different types of paradoxine responsive seizures, and reminding us all that they're not all the same and that all of the treatments are different depending on which gene defect you have. And that, again, we could go into that in more detail at another time. And that would be really a very worthwhile discussion if I was the one suggesting webinars. When I think about where to buy paradoxine from, when a family asks me where to buy it from, I say, you know what, I don't have a child with PDE, but let me introduce you to some other families who've been going through this for a while and sort of share what they've learned and shared what some of their experiences are about sort of where to get it from, the cheapest stability. As a reminder, most of you might be on paradoxine, which is a form of B6. And some of you, as are I think your daughters, are on paradoxal 5-phosphate or PLP. And just
Correct.
as a reminder, those are very different forms of B6. And so what someone tells you about paradoxine, which is often easy to get from sources like Amazon or Whole Foods, might not be true for paradoxal phosphate. But I do think I would defer to this group of parents to say, like, I've been doing this for 10 years. Here's my best practices. This is what I've learned has been a good resource for it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Curtis. There was another question, and I'll make this the last one for now, and we'll move the rest to our future sessions. And this is an important one for us as well as a foundation to think about. How do we, I assume that Connie's question is essentially, how do we get more doctors to understand what's going on? How do we do better outreach to physicians? Because as she mentioned, some people have had quick diagnosis, but I think most of us have had a very traumatic diagnostic process.
Yeah, I really hope that that's a partnership between us as clinicians and scientists and families. One thing that is really nice is that my training and focus is in metabolic physicians and teams, as is Dr. Shelkowitz, who's on this call. And so we've done a lot of education towards metabolic physicians. Dr. Gospi is a neurologist and certainly has done lots of education to neurologists over times. And you will see that sometimes we, publish our papers in different journals to try to hope that we are educating different groups of physicians. But we know we miss people. And it's really hard when you are the expert going to your physician and saying, like, my child has PDE, and your physician's like, I heard about it in med school once. I don't really know much about it. And so one thing that we often do, and I'm going to speak for Dr. Gospi here, is that him and I are more than willing to talk to your physician if they are interested in talking to us about PDE. Our hope is that newborn screening will change this, right? Because you don't test a child for PDE with newborn screening. Every child gets tested. Really, it's every child we hope in the world will be tested for PDE at birth. Currently, there is a 6-country group working together led by us in the US. as well as the Netherlands, Spain, Germany, Italy, and I apologize, I don't remember what the sixth one is. But we have been working together to try to get all of the children in those countries to have newborn screening. I'll also be honest that I could talk about it till I'm blue in the face here in the US. I could say that here's all the scientific evidence. This is how easy it is to do it. But the committee that decides what conditions have newborn screening, what they really care about is what parents think. Do parents think that this would have been important for their child to be diagnosed at birth? So if we as a group really think we should get newborn screening approved in the US, we're going to have to partner. And I'll be honest, it won't be me leading it. It'll be you guys leading it. But we really will have to partner as we go to that committee in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, thanks, Curtis. As we wrap up, I did want to introduce Dr. Gospi, as Curtis mentioned a few times. And Kathy, I'm sorry, we haven't met before, but thank you for saving the webinar and being here. Dr. Gospi is hopefully going to be our March speaker. If you wanted to introduce yourself, Dr. Gospi, and just let us know that you'll hopefully be back with us in March.
Thanks a lot. I'm Sid Gospi. I'm a professor emeritus at the University of Washington, and have been working on this particular disorder for, as Curtis mentioned, most of my career, since really in the early 1990s. And while I am now retired from clinical care, I'm still collaborating with several people, Curtis primarily, but also the PDE consortium out of Vancouver and the Netherlands on these various questions. I should just to make one point about what the best form of pyridoxine might be. I think it's important to for everybody to remember that pyridoxine and pyridoxal phosphate are nutraceuticals, and so they are not regulated by the FDA. And so there are, a wide variety of products that contain these vitamins, and the bioavailability of the substance is quite variable, and there are no side-by-side comparisons that you can say that product X has been compared with product Y, and X is clearly preferred. As Curtis was saying, it's speaking to other parents and finding out what product, what manufacturer of pyridoxine seemed to work best for their child is probably the best way to approach that question.
Thank you so much. Well, I really appreciate that everybody stuck with us as we figured out Zoom. Next month will be even better. Give me feedback on if this is a good time for everybody. If we do like the last Thursday of the month, just feel free to email me or ping any other parent. I'm sure they'll find a way to get to us. Facebook. Thank you everybody for this webinar. I'm really excited, and hopefully we can keep the momentum going, and see you next month.